Okay, good morning. This is Richard Hsu, host of Hsu Untied. This morning, I'm very pleased to have with me as my guest Shaalu Mehra, who's a partner at Foley. Shaalu, welcome to the program.
Well, it's great to be here, Richard. Thanks for having me here.
Well, Shaalu, you have one of the more interesting backgrounds, at least as far as lawyers go. You have a physics degree and an engineering master's degree. What made you choose that field in the first place?
Uh, it's a great question. My undergraduate is in physics, but I also studied a lot of philosophy and math.
Oh,
I think it was a couple courses short of my philosophy degree, and maybe three or four classes short of my math degree. Uh, And so my interest, I always was interested in understanding things axiomatically, I think.
hmm,
I wanted to understand things from first principles. Math is what sort of my natural calling was. That's
hmm.
what sort of came to me easiest and what, was the most axiomatic of the subjects. But I really wanted to sort of understand what I could, I think, about the way the world works at a fundamental level. And so that drove me into physics. I really enjoyed my physics classes my freshman year and gravitated into that. But I was also doing philosophy classes. It
Hmm.
was another passion of mine.
What kind
Uh,
of
I,
career goals did you have at that time? What were you thinking?
at the time, the only career I really understood was academia.
Hmm.
Uh, my dad was a college professor.
Hmm.
My mom had a graduate degree and worked at the university library,
Hmm.
and that was the career path that was both familiar to me, but also what I was really inclined to do. I was in sort of the kids I grew up with. It was a not uncommon career path. Of course, yeah, professors' kids.
Well, you went on to get a master's degree. Were you looking at a PhD? Were you in a PhD program and you stopped it
Yeah.
early? Well, tell me about what happened there.
So yeah, I was studying physics and math and philosophy at as an undergrad. And I really got interested in the idea of computation. For my philosophy classes, I did a lot of philosophy of mind and connectionism. AI was a popular subject within that. I was also doing mathematical logic classes and learning about coding theory and Gödel's theorem. And uh, the sense I had was that the interesting research being done there was in computer science departments. So not having taken a computer science class, I still applied for graduate programs in computer science that I applied in PhD programs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just very interested in that, and that was the area that I wanted to do
Did
research.
you how far did you get into your PhD? Did you get to your thesis or you stopped before
Now,
you
ABT,
Uh-huh.
all thesis.
Uh-huh.
It's I couldn't find a research topic that I just wanted to devote my life to.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
uh, that was my struggle in graduate school. I loved graduate school. It was a good time in my life. I really, intellectually, it was a really exciting time for me. And a lot of that was because I was new to the field. I was new to computer science. And
Mm-hmm.
I was just getting to learn, all these different areas of the field at the cutting edge, right? When you're in graduate school, you're taking seminars, you're reading papers, and that was all really exciting to me. But the challenge for me is because I was so new to it, I couldn't really pinpoint a thesis topic that I wanted to devote my life to.
Mm-hmm.
I tried a couple of different ones, really enjoyed them, but coming from an academic background, I knew that whatever my thesis topic was what I was going to devote my life to.
Yeah.
Both, during my dissertation, but then, in the years that you're, getting tenure, that was going to be the focus of my life, for the foreseeable, for a couple of decades probably.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't find a topic that I thought was
Mm-hmm.
compelling enough to want to do for the
Mm.
next 20 years.
So how did law school even come into the picture? Who gave you that idea?
That was my own that was my own idea.
Oh, really?
Yeah, part of it was, as I mentioned, I kind of always had an axiomatic bent. I was always into, even as a kid, when I would sort of deconstruct arguments, try to construct sound arguments, and engage with them. That's what I liked about math. I liked the idea
Mm,
of generating proofs,
mm,
unassailable proofs from
mm,
first
mm,
principles.
mm,
But I think perhaps I just had an argumentative side. And so, the notion of law school was kind of always in the back of my mind as a possibility, I think.
Mm,
I just had this intuition that those kind of skills were something I could apply as a legal practitioner.
mm, mm.
And apart from that, I suppose if I'd had more exposure to the business world, an MBA would have occurred to me. But
Yeah,
I
yeah,
just didn't, where I grew
mm,
up and the way I grew up, I just didn't have
yeah,
that kind of exposure to the business world. So, I was in graduate school, I was reading a lot about Silicon Valley at the time, which seemed exciting.
yeah,
And, as I said, what I really liked about grad school was all the different areas of computer science and technology that I was getting to learn. And I had this sense that if I entered the business world, particularly again coming to Silicon Valley, I'd get to exposure to a lot of cutting edge technologies. Just the
yeah,
way I
yeah,
did my first years
yeah,
of grad
yeah,
school,
yeah.
and that my entree into that was law.
Yeah, right. Well, what did you think about law school? Because it's so different from obviously being an engineer. Did you like it? Was the struggle at first?
It was a different frame of mind
Mm,
intellectually.
mm.
You're not deriving things from first principles.
Yeah.
You know, that it's more of an applied discipline, more heuristics, and it's absorbing a culture and a frame of mind more than derivation and proof.
Yeah, yeah.
That said, by the time I get to my second semester of law school, I loved constitutional law. I think
Mm,
perhaps
mm,
because it sort of comes from the sense of first principles and deriving outcomes from that. I also, interestingly enough, I really enjoyed the class that we had. I think it was called Foundations of the Regulatory State, which is kind of a law and economics class.
mm,
And I think just the quantitative aspect of it and the idea of assessing legal principles and outcomes quantitatively. I think I enjoyed that approach and at least saw the logic to it, and I enjoy that as well. And that was sort of my progression in law school. That I really came to enjoy it more and more as it progressed. Particularly as I started getting into disciplines that were near and dear to me, like getting into taking technology classes.
yeah.
The World Wide Web was brand new back then. I
Right,
remember
right,
I
right.
was taking law school classes where we studied a case that I was quite familiar with from graduate school because it involved one of my former students. And I got to do a lot of very cool independent study. I was doing research and writing papers on enforceability of open source licenses in the GPL in the
Mm,
mid 90s, right
yeah,
before there was
yeah.
really awareness of it in the industry.
So did
And
you
I
kind of
was
already
doing
know what kind of lawyer you wanted to be when you went to law school, or did you sounds like you kind of
yeah.
already had some notion you wanted to be a tech lawyer of some kind.
I did. I knew I wanted to be in technology. And again, I didn't have a lot of firsthand familiarity with it, but
Mm,
I had a sense that there would be a market for transactional attorneys who were
mm,
steeped in tech.
yeah. Did you ever
You
dabble
were
in?
you were around at that time. Tech transactions
Yeah,
was just kind of coming into fruition as a discipline,
yeah,
but
for
it
sure.
hadn't really been formalized as a practice. But I did have an intuition. I did have a sense that something like that was going to
Yeah.
happen.
Did you ever try your hand at litigation? Did you do that either as a summer clerk or as a junior associate?
Yeah, I did some I did some patent litigation as a summer associate.
Okay.
And I got a little bit involved in patent litigation, um, and writing briefs and helping with Markmans and whatnot as a junior associate. And I enjoyed moot court when I was in law school, but I really wanted I wanted to do net positive sum games, rather than zero sum or sub-zero sum.
Yeah,
I wanted to work in an area where, in doing deals, at least in principle, the parties are better off than they were before on
yeah.
both sides,
At least in
right?
theory, yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, tell me a little about how your career has evolved then. You obviously had an engineering background. Have you been able to use that in any way as your transactional practice has grown and developed over the years?
Yeah, absolutely. In a few different ways. Particularly early on in my career because I was steeped in the tech, right?
Hmm.
I was more than conversant with the engineers and the technologists, right? Because I was I was fresh out of grad school,
Yeah, right.
and I was doing a lot of work. I was working in both transactions, but also in IP at the
Hmm.
time.
Hmm.
I'm a registered
Hmm.
patent attorney, and so my tech background had a direct bearing there. And I continue to work in the tech vertical, and so I try to maintain you know, familiarity with the current tech stacks. I'm obviously not as steeped in it as I once was, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
so,
yeah.
uh,
I assume you're doing a lot of stuff in AI now.
as we all are, yeah. Which is a remarkable development. When I originally went to graduate school, I went into the AI program. That's what
Yeah,
I
right.
was
Yeah,
inclined
quite a
to
bit
do.
different back then, I'm assuming. A lot of tech transactions lawyers, a lot of them go in-house because it's a very sort of easy conduit. Is that something you ever looked at seriously, or were you ever tempted to go in-house at any point in your career?
Yeah, well, I did in fact. As a third year associate, I went and
Oh,
became I became GC of a venture-backed company. This
oh,
2001. So I did that for a year and a half.
oh,
It was,
okay, interesting. Huh,
notwithstanding that it was the beginning of the downturn, and
yeah,
that it was in the networking space, which was particularly hard hit.
okay.
But it was a really compelling opportunity. I was responsible for all the legal work. It's where I was really cutting my teeth and really started doing venture work and
Hmm.
venture debt. But yeah, it was also very interesting from an IP perspective. That company had built one of the very early Linux-based routers, and we're building application layers on top of that. And so I had to come up with a strategy that allowed us to be full participants in the ecosystem, under the GPL, while still being able to build, a proprietary differentiator
Yeah.
that was consistent with it. And at the time, that was a novel challenge.
Hmm. Hmm.
And yeah, it was a really valuable experience. I did that for a year and a half.
Would you ever consider going back in-house again if the right opportunity came up or presented itself?
I'll never say never, but I like practicing. I like being in private practice.
Yeah,
I like having multiple clients.
yeah,
I,
yeah,
I like getting to develop best practices and share expertise with more than one company.
yeah. Well, Shalu, this has been a fascinating conversation. I've followed your career for many, many years, and I really appreciate your taking the time to share your story with me.
Oh, I'm delighted to.
This is Richard Hsu and Shaalu Mehra. Thanks.